morning, everybody. Sounds like I'm starting a school assembly. Good morning, everyone, and then you have to say, good morning, Miss Campbell. Oh no, this still has its plastic covering on. Oh, that's really annoying. Anyway, hi, hello. I'm gonna be honest. Today, I'm feeling awful. And I didn't really want to turn the camera on and pretend to not be feeling rubbish, but don't worry, I'm not going to go on about it. I just wanted to acknowledge lots of people's mental health is in the toilet right now. So, great start. I would like to distract myself today and set myself a challenge in the hope that it will give me focus and make me feel a bit better. And please join me on this challenge because the challenge is not opening this concealer, though it may as well be. There we go. A reading challenge. I will talk to you about that in a second. I have a stack of books here. I want to set myself a reading challenge today, get stuff done, and also this challenge will enable me to clear a bit of space as well, which I think always makes us feel a bit cleansed, I think. This stack of books here has been sitting on my bedside table. Well, some of them have been sitting there since March or February, I think. And these are books that I'm currently not actively reading. I also have some books that I am part of the way through, but I am making my way through them. They are the ones that I'm currently picking up. I think I talked about this, maybe it was in my March wrap up, I don't remember. But at the start of lockdown in particular, I couldn't work out what I wanted to read, and I had such a short attention span. I think like lots of us, everything felt very overwhelming. I mean, things do still feel overwhelming, but everything felt very frantic, I think, in a brain space kind of way, and I was finding it difficult to work out what I wanted to read, and therefore I started loads of books that I haven't finished, and some of that's not because I wasn't enjoying them, it's just because I was a bit all over the place, and some of them are because I wasn't enjoying them and I put them down and I thought I'll come back to you later to work out if it was the time or if it was you, the book. There are 10 books in this pile, and essentially what I want to do today is get rid of this pile, which I know sounds very ambitious, but bear with me. There are a couple of books that I'm going to put back on the shelf, and I'll talk about those first, and say, okay, I know I definitely want to read you, but now is really not the time. So I'm going to come back to you at some point in the future and take them off my currently reading pile. And then for all of the other books, what I want to do today is spend half an hour with each book reading it, not just, looking at it. I want to read each of the remaining books for half an hour today and decide either I want to continue reading them now and they go onto my active currently reading pile. I really don't want to read you at all and I DNF and decide to get rid of them. Or what's the third option? Oh, the other option is to finish it. I knew there was a third option. The other option is to finish it because some of them I was quite close to the end of. So yes, I have to spend half an hour with each book, decide whether I want to DNF it, keep currently reading it, or finish it within that half an hour. That's the challenge that I am setting myself today, and I would like you to join me. I'm also going to be doing a few bits around the flat, some cooking, and I would like you to join me for that too, and we can catch up and chat about books. I'll tell you whether or not I'm keeping these, what I'm doing with them, but first off I should probably tell you what the books are, shouldn't I? I should tell you what the 10 books are, and then I'll tell you which ones I'm immediately removing from this pile and putting back on the shelf. Let me just put my eyebrows on. Okay, I'm sitting more comfortably on the floor now. Here are the 10 books that have been sitting, judging me on my bedside table saying, why haven't you read me yet? First off, Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. I am putting this back on the shelf, but it will be coming off the shelf again very shortly. So I started reading this in March because The Mirror and the Light, which is the third book in the Cromwell series, was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. And I knew I was going to have to review all of the shortlisted books for a freelance job that I was doing. And in order to read The Mirror and the Light, I thought I probably should read the previous 2 books in the series first, which is quite a task, to be honest. The winner was going to be announced in June, but because of COVID, it's been pushed back to September. So I thought, oh, well, I've got more time now. I mean, it's mid-July and I'm going to be reviewing all of the books at the end of August and I haven't read it yet. So that's interesting, and we'll see how that unfolds. But next month, I'm not going to focus on that one today. It's going back on the shelf. It'll be coming off the shelf again very, very soon. 2 other books that I'm putting back on the shelf, and they are also work related, but for different work, is A Time to Dance, A Time to Die by John Waller, which is about the dancing plague of 1518. And I'm researching this for a non-fiction book that I'm reading it as research for a non-fiction book that I'm writing, and also to feed into research I'm doing for future episodes of Fairy Tales with Jen. I do have more of those planned. I just haven't got round to those yet, but I do have one coming up soon, I promise. And the other one is Dispatches from Dystopia, Histories of Places Not Yet Forgotten by Kate Brown. This I found quite heavy, to be honest. The way that it's written is much more academic than I thought it was going to be. So I'm going to keep this book on the shelf and read specifically the section on Chernobyl, which is primarily what I bought it for. And then after that, I will probably pass it on to somebody else who will enjoy it more. So those are the 3 books that are going back on my shelves. And then these are the 7 books that I will be reading from today. The first one on this pile is called Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. And this is translated from the Japanese by Jeffrey Trisselot. This is a time travel novel, and in actual fact I have another time travel novel in this pile too. Clearly I just wasn't feeling time travel earlier this year, perhaps because I wanted to do it so much myself. In this book, it's set in a cafe where you can time travel to a time when you were in the cafe before, but you can't change the present. You can only learn more from the past. And I think it's 3 different stories within this cafe, and I just didn't gel with the writing style at all. But I want to give it another shot because I know that it's one of Emma's favourite books over at Drinking by My Shelf, and lots of people seem to love it. So I'm gonna have another go at that today. I also was partway through The Crying Book by Heather Christle. She's one of my favourite poets, and this is a book all about grief. I think because I was feeling quite sad, it just wasn't the book to pick up at the beginning of lockdown. And I know I said that I'm still feeling sad, but perhaps it's okay to revisit that one now. I am also part of the way through At the Pond, Swimming at the Hampstead Ladies Pond. It's a series of essays about people who go wild swimming. Was it really wild swimming? Semi-wild swimming, outdoor swimming at the Hampstead Ladies Pond. It's really not wild swimming because there are showers. Anyway, it's a series of essays about people who love going to this outdoor pool and the reasons why they like going. I put this down because the ones that I had read at the beginning, most of them felt quite, no pun intended, surface level. I had thought they would be more exploration of self, but it felt more about the logistics of getting to the pool and when they go, rather than the deep emotional reasons for why they go. I did enjoy the essay on here by Jessica J. Lee though, who's a writer I already love. So yeah, I'm gonna pick this one up again today, give it another shot. This is the other time travel novel. This is the Victorian Chaise Longue by Marghanita Laski. It's one of the Persephone classics. Persephone are an amazing publisher in the centre of London in Bloomsbury. They reissue forgotten classics mainly by women, and they're normally quite cosy, and I love curling up with them. My favourite, because I'm always asked where I recommend you start with their books because they have so many. My favourite is Doreen by Barbara Noble. But this is a really, really short one and I didn't gel with the writing style, so I'm gonna give that another go. And then 3 books that I was enjoying, I just for some reason haven't picked them up again. It's Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's That Thing Around Your Neck. It's her short story collection. This anthology of poetry called Queer Poets of Colour, and Paige Lewis's poetry collection Space Struck. So that's 7 books that I want to spend half an hour on. I can spend less on each one if I really am not enjoying it and I just want to DNF it. So if I spend half an hour on each one, then that's 3.5 hours of my time today. I also want to make some bread. So let's go do that. I can start it, and then whilst it's rising, I can get cracking on the reading. Let's go. Making bread is definitely something that I've loved doing during lockdown, and it's something that I'll continue, I think, even after this has all finished. Ocado realised that lots of people wanted to do baking, and now they've started offering 10 kilogram bags of flour. So over in the corner over there, I'll insert it back away, I've got a 10 kilogram bag of white bread flour and one of plain flour as well. I'm just using up the last of this today, which is strong malted seeded bread flour, and it makes great bread, especially I think for soup, and it's full of sunflower seeds and it's really yummy. I'm gonna have to add a little bit of wholemeal bread flour too, because I don't have quite enough, like only a tiny bit more is needed. There we go. So you need, if you're making bread, 500 grams of bread flour, and you need one of these, if I can open it. Come on, strength. There we go. Which is 7 grams of dried yeast, and then you want to add a bit of salt as well. Once you've added that, you want to mix it in. I'm just going to use my hand. And then you add in about 3 tablespoons of oil. I just eyeball that. And then you want to add in 300 milliliters of warm water. So here we go. So I just pour that in all at once and then stir it. Oh, the sink is making such a noise. Stir it together, bring it together before turning it out. Okay, sink. Turning it out onto the surface and kneading it for 10 minutes. One of the things that Mr. M and I have really missed during lockdown is going for breakfast and then for a long walk. So we used to go to Dystopia, which is an Indian restaurant in London. There are 5 of them, I think. There's one in Edinburgh now too, and we'd go to the one at King's Cross for brunch at a weekend, and then afterwards we would go for a long walk along Regent's Canal, and it was just one of our favourite things to do together. So I thought I would try and recreate their breakfast on Saturday. So I got up at 6 in the morning. It was a surprise that I was doing for Mr. M, also for myself, but you know, it was for him as well. So I got up at 6 in the morning and made naan bread, and I'd never made naan before. I'd made pitta, which is similar-ish, but the ingredients are different. I will link the recipe that I used in the description box down below. So yeah, I got up at 6 in the morning and I made naan bread and then filled it with what they do at the Shum. They have naan wraps. They do bacon ones, sausage ones, egg ones, vegan ones. So I made naan bread and filled it with cream cheese and chili jam and bacon, so fake bacon, and made these delicious naan rolls. Like, I don't know if it's just been a long time since I've eaten Dystopia or if it really did taste like it, but I was very happy with it. And so was Mr. M. Sadly, we didn't get to have their delicious tea and go for a lovely long walk afterwards, but it was a nice thing to do. I've actually made a highlight on Instagram of some of the baking that I've been doing and linking to baking videos that I've done as well. So if you would like to find them all in one place, I suppose I could make a playlist actually on YouTube as well. Maybe I will do that. I will link both of those things in the description box down below. All right, I am going to continue kneading this for 10 minutes. Okay, so I've kneaded that for 10 minutes. I put a little bit of oil back in this bowl, coat this in the oil, and then cover it with a clean tea towel, which is over here. Yeah. cover it with a clean tea towel, and then leave it to rise for an hour, which gives me enough time to pick up 2 books. So let's try, which one should we try? Before the Coffee Gets Cold and the one about swimming in the Hampstead Ladies Pond. Let's go to those 2 first. Two books down and mixed results. I've decided to DNF Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I mean, it was kind of a relief to feel the same way about this book as I did the first time that I read it. I know for certain it's the book and not the time that I was reading it. It's just our relationship is not meant to be. So I think the thing that frustrates me about this book is that we jump from one person to another before we really get to the meat of their narrative, and it just meant I couldn't really care about their story. And the writing I didn't find particularly elevated or beautiful, so it wasn't as if I could connect with that and then excuse the jumping narrative. There just wasn't anything in this book that made me think I must keep reading it. It just felt a bit spread out, and I'm sure it's gonna come all together and progress, but I just don't feel that tug to keep reading until it does that. So I'm gonna part ways with this book and make sure it finds a home with someone who loves it more than I do, and that is absolutely fine. At the other end of the scale though, I also picked up At the Pond, and I said I hadn't really connected with the essays that I'd read so far, that I had enjoyed Jessica J. Lee's essay, I'd enjoyed her previous books, but the 2 essays that I read in the half an hour when I was reading this, I adored, particularly the first one that I read, which is called Small Bodies of Water by Nina Mingya Powles, and it felt very timely because I've just bought her poetry collection, her latest poetry collection, Magnolia. Let me grab it so I can show you because it's got a beautiful cover. There we go. It's stunning, isn't it? Also, I feel like I am camouflaged with it. Beautiful. So this is currently shortlisted for the Forward Prize, which is why I picked it up. And it was a pleasure to read her essay where she's talking about the fluidity of belonging and associating that with water, and talking about her childhood and all the times that she has been immersed in water and the creatures that she has experienced and seen, and the relationships that she's forged within water as well. She talks about the friendships that she used to have when she was younger and living in New Zealand. She now lives in London, and she also discusses her Chinese heritage too. There are so many things packed into her essay, and I found it so emotional. It actually made me cry. She says, in his essay, Mixed Race Superman, Will Harris writes that the mixed race person grows up to see the self as something strange and shifting, shaped around a lack. Is it that I've anchored myself to too many places at once or nowhere at all? The answer lies somewhere between. Over time, springing up from the in-between space, new shapes form. I am many mountains, I am many bodies of water, strange and shifting. She also says, when I got my first period when I was 11, it was swimming that I was most afraid of. Not of attracting sharks in shallow waters like boys stupidly said we might, as if they could somehow scare us more than our own bodies already had. So she mainly focuses on her childhood, and that made it very different to the essays that came before in this collection, because the focus was not primarily on the Hampstead Ladies Pond. She just has that at the end where she says that it's her new place to go swimming, and she relates it back to all of the other places she's gone swimming before, and I just thought that was a wonderful, wonderful essay. The next essay in the collection is by So Mayer, and in that they talk about gender and fluidity and the history of the Heath and Kenwood House, and again it felt so different to the essays that had come before. At the end, they say, a recent Kenwood Ladies Pond Association meeting about allowing trans women swimmers to continue using the ladies' pond, as they long have, wore women-only signs from the pond gate around their necks, a grotesque invocation of the slave auctions only feet from where Bell and the Earl of Mansfield fought for emancipation. It gives me reservations about the pond as a community, gives me literally a sinking feeling as heavy as lead. I know I'm not alone. There are many trans and non-binary people who swim and have swum in the ladies' pond. Their molecules and their courage are already coursing through the water like minerals, feeding the daffodils. So I loved that essay too, and therefore this is going to be moved onto my currently reading pile, and I'm going to be actively reading this. And I'm very glad to have had such a strong reaction to it. When I picked it back up again, there is no hesitation that I'm going to keep reading this book. It's been an hour. Are we ready for the grand reveal? Oh, she has grown. She has grown. Okay, so what you want to do at this stage is you want to take it out, put it onto the let's try that again. You want to take it out and put it onto the surface. I'm just putting a bit of flour down, and you want to knock the air out of it. You don't want to knead it again. You just want to kind of squish it back down, which I know feels like you're undoing all of your hard work, but I promise you're not. You then want to shape it into a ball, and then grab a baking tray with some baking parchment on it and place it on the baking parchment, and then you want to cover it with the tea towel again for 1 more hour, which gives us time to pick up 2 more books. So I will pick up The Crying Book by Heather Christle and Space Struck by Paige Lewis. A mixed bag yet again, and I'm going to be doing different things with both of these books. So this is The Crying Book by Heather Christle. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this is a book about grief. It's written in a style that very much reminds me of Maggie Nelson. So lots of different thoughts. Think of it as dropping pipettes filled with watercolor paint onto a canvas. It's like she's doing that with lots of different thoughts and seeing how they blend into each other. At first they appear to be quite separate, but obviously they have this common theme. So she's talking about all the times that she has, well, not all of the times, some of the times she has cried in her life, but she's also looking about how academics have written about grief and art, and how animals experience grief. I particularly love the research that she's done into grief in nature. She says, hunters are not the only ones who make elephants cry. Mabra elephantophila, a moth species found in Thailand, feeds on elephant tears. Another type of moth will not wait for tears to appear. If a creature's eyeball is dry, the moth will irritate it until it begins to water. So yeah, I find it really interesting, but at the core of this book she's talking about trying to have a baby and being pregnant and having a child, and I'm just not really in a headspace where I can read about that at the moment. So I want to keep that book and come back to it at a later date. And the other one I read in this hour while the dough was rising again is Space Struck by Paige Lewis, and I actually finished reading this. I started reading it during one of the reading room ASMR videos that I did when there was a thunderstorm, and I think, oh, excuse me, my phone is ringing. 2 seconds. Sorry, rudely interrupted there. As I was saying, I picked this up during the reading room ASMR video when there was a thunderstorm. And when I picked it up again today, I realized maybe subconsciously I had chosen that one because it has the word struck in the title. This is a book that I really admired. There were about 5 poems in this collection that I have marked because I really, truly loved them. It felt like when I read them, they reached out of the page and grabbed me and shook me quite a lot. The rest of it, it felt like walking around an art gallery. You know, sometimes you can feel that with poetry collections where you're exploring the room and you like what you see, but it's just only very occasionally you'll stumble across a painting or a poem that you really, really connect with. There was one poem in here though, and the reading experience of it felt like reading lockdown. And I was just perplexed and amazed that this wasn't written about lockdown. And I thought I would share it. With you. It's called Chapel of the Green Lord. This spring, the smog is so thick I can't see the stars, which means there aren't any stars left. It's pointless to argue against this, to say no, they're on vacation. No, they'll come back with new summer hats and an answer to my question. If this world is a plucked violin string, am I part of its sound or its stillness? Once I woke and believed myself full of the old heaven. I wanted to trap it, make it stay. I swallowed a hive's worth of honey and still no stars. This smog is thick enough to turn my lungs gummy. I stay inside, line my bed with spider plants and succulents, christen it Chapel of the Green Lord, and go to sleep with the sheets pulled up over my sticky mouth. Sometimes you read a collection of poetry, and as I said, there may only be a few key poems that shine out, but it doesn't matter because you're just so grateful for those particular poems. You don't mind, I was gonna say wading through, that sounds negative, that's not what I mean, but sorting through the treasure box of other things in order to unearth those things. It's a process, and that's very rewarding. Let's go check on the dough. Sorry, I'm just quickly interrupting myself before we get to the dough. I also meant to say there was a weird connection between these two books as well. There seems to have been several coincidences today, like the essay I was reading earlier by the poet whose book I had just bought. So in the Crying book, Heather Christle talks about shadows and mourning shadows and versions of yourself, and she references that to Peter Pan when he's crying over his shadow not wanting to be attached to him anymore. She also references Paige Lewis, the author of this book. She references one of her tweets. And then in Paige's book, there is a poem all about shadows. It's in a poem called When I Tell My Beloved I Missed the Sun. We walk into town and play the shadow game, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry for stepping on your shadow, and please be careful, my shadow is caught in the wheels of your shopping cart." It's all very polite. I just thought it was weird that they both reference shadows and also that the Crying book referenced Paige Lewis, and I just happened to be reading those side by side. Okay, now we're going to the bread. So this has had its second proof. Oh my goodness, it's huge. It's huge. Okay, not normally this big. I think I needed with extra vigor today. So I've preheated the oven to 200 degrees Celsius. I've done that because we have a fan oven. If you don't have a fan oven, you should put it, I think, on about 210, 220. I am going to score the top of this with this knife here. Across and across, and then I'm going to sprinkle it with some flour, and then it goes in the oven for half an hour. Time to read another book, and this time I will read the Victorian Chaise Longue. There is clearly something between me and time-traveling novels today. This one is also not my friend, so I'm going to pass it on to somebody else. And you know I'm not enjoying it because it's only 99 pages long and I'm still deciding not to finish it. It's about a woman who has just had a baby, contracts tuberculosis, and then falls asleep on this Victorian Chaise Longue and then wakes up on it. But the Chaise Longue is now in an antique shop and she doesn't know how she got there. There is an interesting conversation about women's bodies and trying to get back to your body. But again, the writing style, I'm just not gelling with it. It's the first Persephone book that I've DNF'd as well. Anyway, onwards. Let's go and take the bread out of the oven. I wish that you could smell this through the camera because it smells amazing, but sadly I can't eat it yet because it needs to cool for half an hour. But you know what that means? That means that I have half an hour to read another book. So I will pick up Queer Poets of Colour. So we have another coincidence. The first poem that I read in Queer Poets of Colour today was Ocean Vuong's Someday I'll Love Ocean Vuong. And I'm currently reading his novel, which is on my bedside table, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, which I'm enjoying, but I think I prefer his poetry because I adored Night Sky with Exit Wounds. This anthology, there's some great stuff in here and then some that I am not particularly drawn to, but that's always the case with anthologies. You have to find the ones that speak to you, and then of course you get to discover new voices that you can go out and read more of, which is why I love anthologies. The poem in here that I loved the most today is, let me find it, Madison Johnson's Actually Yes, Everything is About Race, and they're talking about a food program. It says, actually, yes, everything is about race. especially this episode of Food Network's Chopped. Obviously, I'm rooting for the token, the black woman, the black dude from Baltimore, the tiny brown vegan woman, even though all her food looked kind of nasty. And it's got some really funny bits in here. It says, in the background, some white guy says sriracha, and it sounds like a hate crime. The white guys are always saying sriracha, always making reductions, always sure that they'll win. And it moves from being really funny into being not funny at all, and it's seamless, and it shocks you and gets under your skin, but you don't notice that it's doing that until it's happening. And that is the mark of a really brilliant poem. Near the end it says, like how the white boy will always blame Test, like how the black girl will always cook herself down into an apology. The white man's fork always in their curry, always in their hair, always breaking down their front door, always scraping the bottom of the plate, asking for more. There are so many layers to this poem. And I haven't read Madison Johnson before, so we see if they have what books they have out. Oh no, it doesn't say. There are normally, in anthologies, there are normally author bios at the back, but I guess maybe because there's so many poets in here, then yeah, there's I think over 100, so maybe it's understandable, but they don't have their bio. So I'm definitely going to look up this poet, and I will list their collections in the description box down below. The bread should be cool enough to eat now, so let's go check that out. Can you see it's full of seeds, which make it extra delicious? It's still warm, so I'm going to have some of this with some butter and some soup. I don't think it's any surprise that I've decided to continue reading That Thing Around Your Neck by Chimamanda and Ngozie Adichie. I don't know why I stopped reading this. I think it's because it's easy to stop reading short story collections because you've reached a definite point. There's no cliffhanger that makes you pick it up again, and they're always there ready for you to go back later and you won't have missed anything. So I'm not going to speak about the stories that I read in the half an hour that I read today because I'll be repeating myself when it comes to the end of month wrap up. But needless to say, the way she writes characters and place and relationships is so visceral, and she's wonderful. So that means I've decided to, let's recap. I have decided to put 4 books back on my shelf. I finished reading 1, I DNF'd 2, and I'm continuing to read 3. So that's 10 books sorted through and filed away, and now my bedside table only has the books on that I am actively currently reading and is not a teetering pile that's going to fall over at any given moment, which is a huge relief. Insert a picture of bedside table now. I mean, there are still lots of books on it, but there are definitely fewer books on it. Before I go, I am going to make a pile of books about disability and disfigurement because it's Disability Pride Month, and over on Instagram, Kendra, I think it's Kendra who's running it, she's encouraging people to post pictures of their disability stacks, so piles of books. So having just dissembled 1 pile of books, I am going to make another pile of books, but then that pile is going to go immediately back onto my shelves of books about disability and disfigurement that I've read and that are on my TBR. I don't think I will pull all of them off my shelves because I have an awful lot. I also wanted to mention, if anyone is looking to get a copy of The Girl Aquarium or The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night or any of my non-fiction books about bookshops, my online shop is now open again. You can get all of my books in bookshops, but if you would like a signed copy, I can ship to anywhere in the world. It was closed because of lockdown, and I still can't get to a post office. However, I have found a post box near me that can fit most of my books through. Sadly, I can't fit Franklin books through because they are huge, but any of my other books I can now post. So just mentioning books about disability and disfigurement, because both my poetry collection, The Girl Aquarium, and my short story collection, The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night, touch on those things. Not even touch, explore those things. They are big themes in those books. So I will link my shop in the description box down below if that's of interest. The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night is currently reprinting. I think we're on to our 6th or 7th reprint, which is really cool, which is why it is currently out of stock in a few places, but it'll be back next week. So yeah, let's do a montage of me making this pile of books. Cut to that. I will link videos in the description box down below where I've talked about disability and disfigurement, where I've given book recommendations too, because I realise I've just shown you a whole load of books in very quick succession. If you would like to find out more, I'm not going to link all of those in the description box down below, but I will link videos where I've talked about books about disability before, and I'll also link the Instagram post that I will put up today with those books in if you want to go and look at those titles some more. Thank you so much for joining me in this video. Reading and sorting through all of that and making bread has definitely helped my brain a little bit. I've also put a load of laundry on, which always makes you feel accomplished, doesn't it? Even though you're not really doing much by putting on a load of laundry. It feels satisfying. Okay, I'm gonna go and edit this video so I can get it up for you guys today. I hope that you're all doing okay, and I'm sending you lots and lots of love. Bye.